Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Instagram Live. We are from the EPP HQ in Brussels. Very happy and very glad to be with Siegfried Mureșan today, our EPP Vice President and also member of the European Parliament, for this new episode of the EPP Family Talks with a particular focus today on recovery. We are very glad to be with you, Siegfried, and we of course welcome all our viewers and followers.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very nice to be with you.
Thank you, Siegfried. We see that today we are in the recovery phase in Europe. We will certainly have a 5% growth this year, more or less 4% next year. We have 22 national plans for recovery and resilience which have been approved. 18 member states who already received pre-financing money. So my first question, very general one, what does the EU recovery mean for you as a politician, member of the European Parliament, of course, but also as a European citizen?
Immediately after the crisis generated by the coronavirus hit us, the European Union tried to help. We have completely flexibilized the rules for accessing EU funds so that money can be used where they were needed in combating the crisis. Medical equipment was bought, masks and so on, through EU funding. In my country, for example, 350 million euros went into the financing of the so-called short-term unemployment, the technical unemployment. In Germany, it is called Kurzarbeit. So those people who could not go to their place of work, they were basically paid, and part of the money was coming from EU funds. But soon after, we understood that this crisis is not only a sanitary crisis, but it will have significant social and economic consequences in the long term, and the European Union decided to launch the biggest package of economic support ever created by the European Union, 750 billion euros. And what is important now is that people, enterprises and regions affected by the virus will be helped. So money is coming now, and this is important to me as a citizen and also as a politician, that we make sure that money gets to the people in need. This is why it was very important that this large package of economic support is being proposed by Brussels, but it was adopted by the European Parliament and by all governments of member states governed together in the Council, and we introduced in the piece of legislation the obligation of the governments to work with local and regional authorities, with trade unions, with the private sector, and we allowed flexibility in spending the money because the needs of Malta are different than the needs of Finland, and the needs of France are different than the needs of Ireland. So we have clear rules from European level, but it is important that it is possible that money is spent exactly where it is needed. So for me, this is a project, and it is support from the people of Europe for the people of each of the member states of the European Union. We have done something without precedent. We have together said we are united. We give the European Commission the permission to go to the financial markets and borrow money for all of us, and the money will be allocated exactly there where it is needed. So it is, an unprecedented sign of solidarity and of unity at the level of the European Union.
It's important to come back maybe because to the role of the European Parliament. You played a key role because you were the rapporteur on this very specific file. So you were mentioning the need to work with local authorities, with social partners, but what did really change with the input of the European Parliament when it came to designing this unprecedented mechanism for the recovery?
To adopt a piece of legislation at European level, we always have a proposal made by the European Commission, which is the executive branch. It is like the government. And then the European Parliament needs to adopt the piece of legislation together with the Council of Ministers, in which the governments of the 27 member states are united. So I was, as you said, together with two other colleagues in the Parliament responsible for this piece of legislation. There was one colleague from the Socialists, one from Renew, and myself on behalf of the EPP. The first thing that we worked on was the following. In the next years, the European Union will spend more money than ever from the traditional budget of the European Union and from this recovery and resilience facility. 1,800 billion euros in the next 7 years. The more money you spend, the more you need to make sure that money is well spent. So we have linked spending all categories of EU funds with the rule of law. If you want European money, you have to respect European values. It's as simple as this, and this was something that we, from the Parliament side, pushed very much. Then we have strengthened the role of the European Anti-Fraud Office, of the European Public Prosecutor, and the European Court of Auditors to make sure that money is well spent, and if there is any irregularity or attempt at fraud, it is being tackled. And then, as I said, we have made sure that the local, regional authorities, trade unions are included, because we did not want this facility, to be just established by Brussels, because we have to be honest, mayors, locally elected officials know the needs of their communities better than any functionary in Brussels. And last point, when the Commission proposed this facility, they proposed a pre-financing for each country of 10%. We from the Parliament side said the following. We said this crisis will, especially during the course of the first year, be deeper than we thought, will affect more enterprises, and we said pre-financing needs to be increased, more money needs to flow sooner, so that economic development can be supported in a more robust way and the job creation be supported as well. So we have managed to increase the pre-financing from 10% to 13%. It might not sound much in the first instance, and it might sound a detail, but for my country, for example, Romania, we will receive a total of 30 billion euros from this fund. An increase of pre-financing from 10 to 13% means an increase of the pre-financing from 3 billion to 3.9 billion euros, so it's almost 1 billion more for my country, and figures are similar for any other country, so it means more support sooner.
Of course. Now at the European Parliament, or maybe in other institutions, I don't know, but you represent also, of course, the European People's Party and the European Parliament. Is there a kind of monitoring of all these huge amounts of money, but also of national plans? How does it work, and what are your expectations when it comes to really assess whether the funds are used for the good areas, economic sectors, regions, and fields in general?
The process is the following. We adopted the legislation at European level in February in the Parliament. Then each government of a member state had to present its own national recovery plan, work with local and the regional authorities, with trade unions, with the private sector, as I said. Present its plan with the European Commission. The European Commission adopts the plan, gives its approval, then the Council of Ministers gives a final vote on it as well, and then the implementation starts. And the implementation works like this. The scope of this plan is to help the people and the enterprise affected by the virus and the economic consequences of it. But the second scope is also to increase our resilience, to strengthen our economy and our public systems in the face of the next crisis. So in simple words, we want to make sure that whenever a next crisis occurs, people will not be hit in the way in which we were hit now. Hospitals have to be enlarged and modernized, new hospitals have to be built. The education systems have to be made more digital. What is taught in school has to be more relevant for young people in view of finding a job. The economy needs to be strengthened to be more competitive, and the public systems, the public administration has to be more digital, more competitive as well, so that whenever a next crisis hits us, our house is more solid. In order to do this, you need money, which we have in this facility, money to invest. But you also need to reform, you need to modernize. And now this facility will be implemented. The governments have their plans, everything was approved, the pre-financing came. And the process of implementing means that the investments start, but also reforms are to be done in the public administration, in the healthcare system, in the pension systems in some countries, in the labor market systems. And this is what will be done. And then every 6 months, each member state presents the investments which they made, the reforms which they did. There will be an evaluation at the European level. We as Parliament are scrutinizing this, we're keeping an eye on it to make sure that all milestones and targets are respected, and basically countries are all on track, because what we don't want to do is to tell to a country, hey, you did not respect the conditions, we cannot pay. What we want to do is to make sure that countries respect the agreements, they respect the European legislation, and we want money to flow and people to be helped. But for this, the rules have to be respected.
Of course, perfect. Do you feel that we are going into the right direction currently?
Look, we have 27 member states in the European Union. 26 have already submitted their plans, and 22 plans were already approved by the Commission. For 18 countries, the pre-financing was already paid. So clearly things are going into the right direction, but 4 plans are not yet adopted. And amongst those 4, 2 are rather problematic, Poland and Hungary. And especially for the case of Poland, we see a questioning of European values, of the rule of law, of the independence of the judiciary, of the balance of power. And the European Commission, I want us to be able to help the people of Poland. I want money to flow, but the European Commission will only be able to pay, to approve that plan and to give its green light for payment if all conditions are met by the Polish government. So for the vast majority of countries, I feel things are going into the right direction. I think we're going into a good implementation phase. I hope that, the last one, specifically Poland, concerns us. I hope things will improve there as well.
Thank you for that. If we take a concrete example of a country, your country, Romania, do you have any flagship example, of a project being now possible thanks to EU funds? Any new initiative and any expectations for the coming month?
Yes, absolutely. The European legislation says very clearly, greening and the transition to a digital economy have to be priorities. So, as I said, we have to help people affected, we have to make our economies and our public systems more resilient, more future-proof, but we also have to make our economy more modern, more digital, cleaner and greener. This is why the law says that 37% of the money needs to go into green investments and 20% needs to go into digital investments. And this is an important thing, for all of the countries. It really is a chance and opportunity. So in my country, for example, one of the largest hospitals in Bucharest can now enlarge their research and innovation capacities. When President von der Leyen was in Bucharest, she visited that. So physicians, doctors can now, enlarge their research innovation capacities. We will be spending a relatively big amount, 3 billion euros, for the education system, for improving the infrastructure, for making sure that pupils can connect, but also for reforming it, improving the curricula and so on. Because the truth is, about 65% of the kids which go today to school in the first grade will retire from categories of jobs which do not even exist today.
Yes.
Many jobs will disappear, many new types of jobs will appear, and many industries will fundamentally transform. So they have to learn skills in a different way than we learned it in the past. So education, healthcare, but still, my country has to catch up a bit with highways. And so we still have to build some highways. We are going to build them, but we are going to build them in an environmentally friendly way. So, for example, there will be forests, they will be surrounded on both sides by forests. There will be clear recommendations, obligations, in fact, on building electrical recharging stations, because highway means better connectivity, advantages for people and enterprises, but we want to build them in a way in which they are in harmony with the environment, firstly, and secondly, they incentivize the transition to electric cars. Now if I don't know exactly where the next charging station is, I'm more reluctant to buy an electric car if I know that I have to drive highways. But if you know for sure that there will be electric stations from 50 to 50 kilometers with enough plugs to charge your car, then your readiness to eventually transition to an electric car is bigger.
It's important to share with our viewers some positive elements and a positive narrative around this recovery, but I would say that today some economists, and just reading the newspapers, some say that inflation and the rise of energy prices can be a threat maybe to this recovery and to the growth pace. how do you feel and see these two metrics, which are indeed the reality for the citizens?
For sure, inflation is affecting people. Now, inflation was generated particularly by the spike in energy prices. The increased price in gas affected us a lot, so it's clear that we have to reduce our dependency, particularly on foreign energy sources, particularly on foreign gas. Transition to renewables, to new sources of energy clearly helps there, because the sun or the wind will always be for free. But we have to make sure that we support those to transition to new sources of energy. There are costs, there are needs for investment, so we have to support them. At European level, we decided to allocate 30% of all of the money that the EU will spend in the next years for projects which have a green component. At national level, same needs to be done. We need to incentivize investments into greening also at the level of private sector. So we need to go into new sources of energy. But we also need to help vulnerable consumers right now. And for example, I said in the plenary of the Parliament, then the European Commission picked up the idea of joint procurement for energy sources, including for gas, and joint storage capacity for those countries who want it on a voluntary basis. Yeah. Because if we are buying gas together, at the level of some member states, ideally as many as possible, we have a bigger negotiating power when we're negotiating with any supplier. Similarly with the vaccines. So it was much better than the EU, with the power of 27 member states, made one big order for vaccines and then distributed the vaccines evenly into all EU member states, than had our 27 countries competed against each other for a limited dose of vaccine. The same is valid for gas. We should buy once for all of us, buy together, store, buy summer when it's cheap, store, use in winter when it is needed. So my concern is now that we are making some decisions which elevate the pressure of the increased energy prices amongst the most vulnerable consumers, because they felt the negative effects of it immediately.
One last question, Vice President, if I may. How do you envision, I would say, the debate on the future of EU economic governance when it comes to the balance between building maybe new or more sustainable fiscal rules, getting back to basics maybe, but also defending and promoting sustainable investments for green transitions, digital ones? How can we build a balance between the new challenges but also the importance of sustainability of our budgets and public finances?
Look, we in the European People's Party are the responsible party at European level, and we always tell people, the truth. And the truth is that also as an individual, you cannot spend more than what you make. Maybe 1 month I spend more than what I make because I buy a bicycle or so, but I cannot do that every month, because at some point the bills are catching up with me and then I have no more space to maneuver. The same is valid also at the level of countries. Now, during this crisis, as we discussed in the beginning, we could do a package of economic support bigger than ever, because we still had the space to do it, because our economies were still credible in the eyes of the investors, and we could borrow money and we could help those who are affected by the virus. If you spend too much, if your debt is too big, then whenever a crisis hits, you have nothing saved. You cannot help the people anymore. So this is why my clear preference is for us to be responsible, not to spend much more than we can afford. Of course, we have to allow for investments. Of course, we have to allow specifically for investments in research, innovation, greening, digital, the things that are needed now. But somehow, of course, respect the rules that we have given to ourselves at European level, which say we should not overspend, we should not spend more than we have, because then we are indebting for future generations and we are limiting our space of maneuver, we're limiting our space to help in the future.
Thank you very much, Siegfried. It was really interesting. We would like to thank all our viewers, followers, for having followed the series of the EPP Family Talks with some ministers, with our EPP leaders also. Today again with Siegfried. We would like to wish you a very nice Christmas break, good Christmas holidays, and hope to see you soon at the EPP HQ, in Brussels, in your countries. Thank you again for your support.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siegfried.